Hi, I'm Sally Duplantier. I'm the host of Wellness Wednesday, and I want to welcome you to our presentation today called Better Aging at Any Age. Here's a brief look at my background. My passion in research is really around helping people keep physically strong and mentally sharp across the decades. And a question that I constantly turn around in my mind and continue to research is this one: how can we live our best life longer? Because what's really interesting is that we are living longer, in fact, 30% longer than we did back in 1900, but we're not necessarily living better because of chronic conditions. So now medical doctors and researchers aren't as focused on simply longevity, how long we live, but we're thinking in a new way about health span. And health span is the number of years that we're physically strong and mentally sharp. And we really want to extend that as much as possible before disease span fits in. So I wish I could just offer you a youth pill today. This would be a very short webinar. But instead, we're going to talk about one of the key markers of aging, and they're called telomeres. If you've never heard of telomeres, you're not alone. It's not a common understanding. Basically, what they are the end caps on our chromosomes, and they keep our chromosomes thriving and dividing, and they impact how we age at a cellular level. I read the book, The Telomere Effect, in 2017, and that really inspired this presentation today. It was written by Elizabeth Blackburn, who's a microbiologist and won the Nobel Prize in Medicine for her work on telomeres back in 2009. And her co-author is Alyssa Epel, who's a psychologist out of UCSF. And their research, combined really with research around the globe, showed that we can slow down aging at a cellular level. Now, I do want to stress that telomeres are only one marker of cellular aging. You may have heard about chronic inflammation. I call that too much of a good thing. It happens as we age, and what starts to occur is that all of our cells experience low levels of inflammation, which is linked to many, many disease states. Another marker is oxidative stress. And this has to do with when our bodies have an imbalance of too many free radicals compared to the antioxidants. So these are somehow connected. We don't understand what's cause and effect, but you'll see that as I talk about telomeres, I may mention one or both of these other markers. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what telomeres are. I'm going to tell you how they affect aging and also how to keep your telomeres healthy. And my real hope is that you can apply one idea and it's something you can take away and use for a healthier you moving forward. So here's a little bit better explanation of telomeres. I mentioned that they're like the end caps on they are the end caps on our chromosomes, but think of them like the plastic that protects a pair of shoelaces. You know, if that plastic starts to wear away and falls off, the shoelace begins to fray and it's pretty much worthless. And telomeres work in a similar way. So every time your cells divide, your telomeres shorten. That's normal, that's natural. And at some point, the telomeres become so short that the cells can no longer divide, and that's known as cell death. Now, that would be kind of bad news if that was all I could share with you today. But what Blackburn discovered, and a major reason for her Nobel Prize in 2009, was an amazing enzyme called telomerase. Telomerase has the ability to start lengthening telomeres. Now, it's not like a fountain of youth. You can't lengthen them indefinitely, But it does mean that if your telomeres begin to shorten, perhaps because of lifestyle choices you've made, you can make different choices that are going to increase their length. And that's what we're going to look at today. What are those factors? So the key takeaway here is that all telomeres shorten over time, but what we want to do is prevent premature shortening. Well, why is that? So let's just look at a high level at some research around short telomeres versus long telomeres. And on the left side, you see the different kinds of conditions that are associated with short telomeres. Premature aging, an increase in chronic inflammation, a reduction in our immune function, a greater risk of heart and lung disease, and even cognitive problems are associated with short telomeres. And part of the way we know this is because some people have a genetic condition which causes their telomeres to shorten very, very young. So at age 15, they display all of the same physical characteristics as somebody who might be 80 years old. On the flip side, long telomeres are associated not just with longevity, living longer, but they're associated with increased health span. So living longer, healthier. And people who have long telomeres report feeling younger as well. So what affects telomere length and also the production of telomerase? There's two things. The first is genetics, and I will tell you, if you have parents that both live to be over 100, I'd be pretty convinced that you have long telomeres. However, we can't change that, so we're not going to talk about that today. What we're going to talk about are lifestyle choices. And I use this diagram on the right to indicate the 4 pillars of health. So we're going to see within each pillar, what are the things that you can do from a lifestyle perspective to have healthy telomeres. I'm going to start with stress because first of all, it probably has the biggest impact, and secondly, there's the most data. So this was really something I had to get my head around. Stress itself does not shorten telomeres. It's how we perceive stress that impacts telomeres as well as biological aging. So let me share with you a couple of studies. This first one was done by Blackburn and Epple back in 2004, and it was with a pretty small group of people. So there was a group of moms, around 60 in each group, and both groups of moms were full-time caregivers for their children. But one group of moms had kids with normal abilities, and the other group of moms had children with severe disabilities or chronic conditions. And so the study was done to see which group would have the shortest telomeres, with the hypothesis being the moms whose kids had chronic conditions or disabilities, their telomeres would be shorter. And what's interesting is Blackburn and Epple found something slightly different. So the moms with the shortest telomere length were the ones that perceived the most stress. It wasn't simply all caregiver moms who had children with disabilities. It was the moms who perceived the most stress and also those who'd been caring for their children the longest, which seemed to indicate that there was some type of effect from long-term chronic stress. Now, this is interesting. It was interesting to me, but I said, well, it's a small study. It's 16 years old. What else is out there? So I think this next study is really fascinating. This was done it started in 1998. It continued for 8 years, and it was a study that was published in Health Psychology in 2012. They looked at 38,000 households, 98,000 people who took the same questionnaire year over year for 8 years. The survey instrument used was from the National Health Interview Survey. And the two questions that were key to this study were, how much stress do you have? And is it harmful to your health? Then what the researchers did was they compared these answers to the National Death Index, and they said, who died? Interestingly enough, the people who had high stress and also reported high perception of stress had a much higher risk of dying. It was 43% higher, so very, very significant. And yet, to me, the most interesting part of this study is that people who said they had high stress but did not perceive it to be harmful to their health had low risk of dying. In fact, lower than people who said they had no stress. So pretty compelling data here. So what health psychologists are seeing is that our response to stress makes a difference. And let me explain that the stress I'm talking about is the kind of chronic stress that we're experiencing now. For example, we're in the middle of a pandemic. The future is uncertain. Jobs have changed. Jobs have been lost. Finances are uncertain. It's that kind of chronic stress. It's not seeing a lion or a tiger or even a 911 call. And there are two ways we might choose to respond to a stress, or that we do respond. One is called a threat response, and one is a challenge response. The threat response is actually harmful to our telomeres. Now, when you think of our response to stress, it's not really in the moment. It's because most of us tend to project in the future. Oh my gosh, and we're anxious, fearful, uncertain. We almost feel, if we express a threat response, that we can't handle something. We're not enough. And so that kind of response is actually harmful to our health, including our telomeres. A challenge response is different. Somebody who has a challenge response may experience the stress in the same way, that kind of tingliness, nervousness. But in some ways, it brings out their best because they rise to the occasion. They are hopeful, excited, they're confident because they feel that either they can tackle what's going to happen or they can enlist the help of others. So again, it's future thinking, it's projections, but in one case, somebody is incapable, in the other, they're very capable. And let me give you a great example, something quite recent. Shelby Delaney is an ICU nurse, and she's working at the front line in an ICU in Oakland. And she posted this recently to her Facebook page. She said, on Monday morning, as I was getting ready for work, I found myself feeling powerless and defeated. It was in that moment I knew I needed to summon my inner warrior. So I threw on my Steph jersey under my scrubs, and she started brainstorming how I could be part of the solution. So she was a fan of the Golden State Warriors, a fan of Steph Curry. She put on her Warrior jersey, and she said, how can I be part of the solution? That's a great example of a challenge response. But here's the problem. How easy is it to change our typical thought patterns? If you tend to have a threat response, if I simply say to you, oh, come on, have a challenge response, don't think that way. It's not that simple. Our thought patterns are based partly on our genetics and also our life experience, and we can't just flip a switch. In fact, psychologists tell us now, don't even try to alter your thoughts. The starting place for this is to develop a greater awareness of them. And that's the practice of mindfulness. Now, interestingly enough, mindfulness has been around for decades, but it's finally getting the attention that it deserves, in which, rather than trying to control our thoughts, we simply become more aware of them. There are many, many great resources for this. I have a supplemental handout, and I'll provide my email at the end of this webinar, so make sure you contact me to get it. But here are the key takeaways. Don't try to manage stress as if it's something you can control. Start by just becoming aware of your thoughts so that over time you can reframe them. And the handout that I'm providing has a link to a great TED Talk, 14 minutes, with Kelly McGonigal, who's a health psychologist, and she'll talk more about how to make stress your friend. So next I want to move on to nutrition, and I'm also going to include weight as part of this nutrition segment. I'm going to do a quick poll. Do you watch your weight? You don't have to answer this out loud, but just think to yourself. No, A, not at all. B, yeah, a little bit. C, I pay close attention. Or D, I am a little obsessed. And I will share with all of you that at my age, which is 67, I'm still a little obsessed with my weight. And part of that is the way I grew up as a fat kid, and it's still kind of ingrained in me. So there's no right or wrong answer there, but I will share with you is that if you are obsessed with your weight and you're obsessed with that scale, that bathroom scale, that you're probably not doing your telomeres any favors, because that psychological stress is actually impacting their length. In fact, telomeres say the waist is a terrible thing to mind. So things that are important to us are not important to telomeres. We may care very much about a number on a scale. At least those of you who answered that you watched it closely or were obsessed. We can try all sorts of tricks to get the number to be what we want on the scale. Telomeres don't care. They don't actually care about your body mass index, which is your weight divided by your height squared. It's a number doctors use, and we have a lot of charts with BMI, but the telomeres are not that affected by it. What telomeres do care about is your metabolic health, and that is tied directly to where you may carry your weight. So if you are overweight or if you are obese, where that extra fat is stored makes a difference. We talk a little bit about apple versus pear shapes. You've probably heard of that. But apple shapes, whether it's a man or a woman are people who carry their weight above the waist. And generally speaking, this excess weight around the waist is actually tied to higher amounts of visceral fat around your vital organs. Now, this in turn leads to all sorts of chronic health conditions and risks, everything from poor insulin control, which then can become type 2 diabetes. It's linked to high blood pressure, high cholesterol. There's chronic inflammation again, and even reduced immune function. So I am not saying that it's not important to be an appropriate weight. If you have an apple shape and a lot of excess weight around your waist, chances are you are overweight or obese. But I'm saying that where the fat is located is more important than just a number on a scale. Now, to complicate things further, telomeres hate yo-yo dieting. And you've probably heard that term. And if you've been like me in the past where you've weighed a lot, you may have lost and gained the same weight many, many times. I swear that from my late teens to somewhere in my early 40s, I gained and lost the same 20 pounds over and over again. Well, telomeres aren't real fond of that because the challenge with most diets is that we lose weight. We're quote unquote good for a period of weeks or months. We lose weight, we go back to our old habits, and we regain even more. And this certainly happened, for example, with the Biggest Loser contestants. They studied a group of them for a period of 6 years after. Almost everyone regained the weight back, and they actually lowered their resting metabolic rate in the process, which simply meant that they weren't even able to eat as much as they could in the past without gaining more weight. So diets, especially that yo-yo diet effect of losing, gaining, it causes physical stress. It causes a lot of psychological stress. And, if that's not enough, it actually is really hard on our skin. So I shared what telomeres don't like, but let's look at what they do like. Telomeres like fish, but not just any fish. They really like omega-3 fatty acids, which are found primarily in salmon, oily fishes like salmon and even tuna. And omega-3 fatty acids are what's called an essential fatty acid. So the body doesn't produce them. We have to eat food in order to synthesize those. Now, I work with a lot of vegans, vegetarians. I know people who just don't like fish. So what else can you eat? Well, these are all great sources of omega-3s. So soybeans have edamame, those all have omega-3. There's even something I love, which is edamame fettuccine. You can get it at the grocery or on Amazon. So those have omega-3s. And then nuts and seeds, especially walnuts, flax seeds, and chia seeds. These are all great sources. Now you might be wondering, well, what do omega-3s have to do with telomere length? And the answer is we're not quite sure. We just know that telomeres are longer in people who ingest omega-3s, and omega-3s are linked to so many other health benefits. For example, they reduce the risk of coronary disease. And we have decades of research on this, starting with a study of Eskimos many years back, where we found that Eskimos ingested about 50% of their daily calories from fat, but they didn't have heart disease. And then it was discovered that, it wasn't any kind of fat, it was mostly from salmon. I included this slide because a new study was just published in 2020, and it was linking the benefit of omega-3 to lower risk of cognitive impairment. And then we have quite a bit of research that shows that omega-3s, because they are anti-inflammatory, also reduce chronic inflammation and oxidative stress. So many health benefits associated with it. So a couple key takeaways here. First of all, how much omega-3 do you need? It's about 2 servings of salmon a week, but you could do soy, or you could add flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts on a daily basis. Secondly, diets really don't work. The losing, the gaining, the regaining, lifestyle changes make a difference, especially if you do need to lose weight. And again, even though I said the scale doesn't matter, the number on the scale, having that excess belly fat does make a difference, not only to telomeres, but to your overall health. There's some fascinating blog posts that were written by 2 doctors out of Stanford, and it looks at a lot of the popular diets and eating patterns. So I've included that in your supplemental handout. I think you'll enjoy that. All right, now, since this webinar started, a pill has been developed. At the beginning, I said, we don't have a youth pill, but look at this. I'm going to read the benefits of this pill. It's going to reduce chronic inflammation. It's going to keep your heart healthy. It will not only improve learning, but it's going to improve your memory. And, if you're highly excitable, it will help you stay calm under pressure. It'll lower blood pressure. It'll help reduce your risk of infection. It can even fight cancer. And oh, by the way, if you had trouble regulating your weight, it will help control appetite and body weight. Now you must be saying, well, Sally, there must be some kind of catch to this pill. So let me tell you, the pill is free and there's no side effects. So I'm going to ask you to consider, would you take the pill? Yes or no? And it's interesting, as I do this for live audiences, usually I found about 80% will take it and 20% don't. They're very suspicious. Well, I have good news for everybody, is that the pill already exists. In fact, it has a specific name. It's called sleep. What's interesting is that every species sleeps, even that lowly earthworm. But only humans will avoid sleep because they want to do something else. So whether it's working too late and then people don't sleep, or whether it's playing late into the evening because they worked so hard all day, whatever it is that causes us not to go to bed, we are the only species that will do that. You would never see a dog saying, "Oh, I think I'll stay up late and watch reruns of Seinfeld and avoid sleep." So how much do you need? Because this is an ongoing discussion I have with people. Interestingly enough, the National Sleep Foundation did a revised study in 2015 to look at the existing guidelines and actually set some new guidelines. So adults aged 24 to 64, that has not changed. That's 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. They added a category for older adults, 65 plus, and it's 7 to 8 hours per night. Now, that shows that older adults need almost as much sleep as anyone else. However, as we age, it gets harder and harder to get that sleep. So here's the research between sleep and telomere length. A study done in 2019 showed that insufficient sleep is associated with premature telomere attrition. Another one in 2017 showed that children who sleep less may actually age faster than their counterparts. And then this one in 2018 was fascinating to me. People who reported that they were only getting 4 hours of sleep per night, the amount of aging that their telomeres demonstrated was equivalent to 8 years of biological aging. So some people still tell me, "Sally, I don't think I really need that much sleep." My husband is one of them. And there's a term for this. It's called the sleepless elite. He swears that he only needs 5 hours a night. Well, maybe, but here's what the research says about the sleepless elite. Some people have a genetic mutation, it's on the DEC2 gene, and it allows them to function fine on just 6 hours of sleep a night. Now notice I didn't say 5 and I didn't say 4, I said 6. But the odds of being part of this population of sleepless elite is very, very rare. So it's less than 1% of the population. And you're more likely to be struck by lightning than to be one of them. So I hope I made my point. The jury is still out about my husband, Rob. We're not sure. Maybe he's special. So it's one thing to avoid sleep. It's another if you can't sleep, especially if you lay awake at night and can't go back to sleep. So here are a few tips. One that I try to employ is what I call the unpower hour. So I stay off my devices, especially my iPhone, which is so tempting. And I stop an hour before I go to bed. I set my alarm and then I just put my phone aside. So I'm not tempted by it. Lowering the room temperature will help. We sleep better in cool conditions. And even a warm bath prior to sleep is helpful because it raises the temperature so then your room feels cooler. Our moms gave us warm milk, but it turns out there's some truth in that because when you warm milk, it releases an amino acid called tryptophan, which is the same amino acid that's in turkey, and it results in getting sleepy after Thanksgiving dinner. And then the general wisdom is that if you lay awake and you can't sleep for more than 20 minutes, get up and do something else. Generally, you want to do some quiet activity that will quiet the mind and not wake you up again, so that you can go back to sleep. And if nothing else, go to a dark room. Doesn't have to be completely black, but dark end room, and just focus on breathing. So the key takeaway here is to prioritize at least 7 hours of sleep a night. You don't make it up on weekends, sorry to say. And then an excellent book, I think it's like kind of a must-read health book. It's called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. All right, so let's talk about the last pillar of health, which is exercise. Now, if you're watching this webinar, you can see this slide, which is full of probably 20 different benefits of exercise, physical activity as we get older, in terms of reducing health risk. You know, some of you are just listening to it, so I won't read all of it, but exercise is probably the most important thing you can do for overall healthy aging, especially given the fact that you can start at any point and you're going to reap benefits. Here's how it relates specifically to telomeres. A study was done in 2008 with 2,400 identical twins. And I love this study because I'm a twin. I'm a fraternal twin, but my sister and I, Sue, were in many studies when we were little. So they gave these twins a questionnaire and they looked at kind of recreational physical activity. They looked at other confounders that could skew results like smoking, socioeconomic status. And then they measured the telomeres in white blood cells, which is a common way to determine telomere length. They adjusted the data for age and BMI and those other confounders I mentioned, and the results were startling. Twins with regular recreational exercise were actually 9 years younger biologically as measured by their telomeres. So pretty dramatic results. You may be wondering which exercise is best. And I always say whatever exercise you will do on a regular basis is best, but these are the guidelines from the American Heart Association. You know, so they recommend either 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic exercise or 75 minutes of high intensity aerobics during the week. And then a combination of strength training and then balance and flexibility. Now, the interesting part about research is there's not a lot on exercise and telomeres. I'm familiar with 3 primary studies, the biggest one being done in 2015 in Germany. And what it found was that telomeres responded the most to aerobic activity. So either moderate intensity or high intensity aerobics. Strength training did not have an impact on telomeres, but strength training is very, very important to your overall health. So I don't want to dismiss that. And then the study did not look at balance and flexibility. So it wasn't even considered in this particular research. So the results, though, were pretty compelling because over 6 months, aerobic exercise doubled telomerase. Remember, that's the enzyme that replenishes your telomeres. And it was done either with people who were brisk walking or light jogging 45 minutes for about 3 times a week, or it was high intensity, high interval training, just short bursts of it. So a warm up, a cool down, and then maybe 4 intervals where people might run for a minute and walk for a minute. Interestingly enough, people who were much more active, who were runners, who were running at least 10 miles a week, didn't show any greater benefits in their overall telomere length. So I do want to point out that high intensity interval training can be a great change of pace from your normal routine. And it doesn't have to be walking and running, because a lot of us, especially after a certain age, we don't want to run at all. But it's that idea of doing something at a comfortable pace and then kicking it up for a short period. This burns calories after you're done working out, it improves your cardiovascular health, and it can be done in a shorter time. So you can get creative with high intensity. Now during shelter in place, I know the Peloton bike is popular. You can do this so you have bursts of, high speed and then moderate speed. Or you could ride your bike in such a way. There's a ton of live streaming dance classes right now, and pretty soon the gyms will open up again. But dance is a great way to do something at a lower, a song that's slower paced and then one that's much quicker paced. So, key takeaways: exercise, absolutely critical to healthy biological aging, and at least 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week. It's like if we were playing poker, that would be jacks to open. I have a lot of resources, including streaming options on demand, good options for shelter in place in the handout. So make sure to get that from me. Okay, bringing it home, where to start. I may have shared things in this webinar that you say, well, Sally, I kind of know that. I've heard that. And you know what? I've heard a lot of things. Here's what I find is that there is a gap between knowing and doing. So often we can understand something intellectually, but we don't apply it. We don't do it. So that's what I'm really hopeful today, is that you can take away at least one thing that you can apply. At least try it as an experiment. So let me give you some examples. If you're having challenges with stress, and it might be that you're forgetful, it might be that you're feeling anxious, it might be that you're just feeling down, try what I call the 1 mindful minute a day, where you simply sit, close your eyes, and breathe for a minute. Listen to the sounds around you, breathe in, breathe out. If your thoughts wander, just bring them back to your breath and try that. You may increase that, but try just a minute a day. On the nutrition side, and by the way, pick one of these. Don't pick all of them. It's too many. Maybe omega-3s are new to you and you realize, oh, wow, I'm not doing any of this. So try 1 serving of salmon or soy. Doesn't have to be 2. At least start with 1 a week and go from there. If you are having trouble getting in daily exercise, just set a little tiny goal of 15 minutes a day to get outdoors. The weather is getting beautiful. And if sleep is your challenge and you realize, you're avoiding sleep to do something else, try the Unpower Hour, where you cut yourself off from your devices at least an hour before bedtime. I'm going to leave you with a final quote. Age does not define us. We define how we want to age. And I want to thank you for listening. My email address is here. Some of you I know are just listening to this webinar. So my email is sally@myzinglife.com. If you would like a copy of the handout, the supplemental handout, please let me know and I will be happy to send that to you. And I wish you all good health. Thank you so much and have a great afternoon.